I mentioned to you offline that I desperately, in trying to figure out the optimal in an ordered set questions to ask you, texted Eric Weinstein asking for what questions he can ask you. And he said that you are definitively one of the greatest living mathematicians, so don't screw this up. But he did give me a few questions. So he asked to ask you, what are the most shockingly passionate, this is in Eric's language, what are the most shockingly passionate mathematical structures? And he gave a list of 4 for him, but he said he really wanted your list. Okay, let me say that. Shockingly passionate mathematical structures.
Shocking.
Okay, is there something you can, is there something that jumps to mind?
Sure. I'm here to shock.
Yeah.
So first of all, Eric Weinstein is a very dear friend, I have to say, and I really, really, really appreciate and love him. He's just like my brother. So it's interesting to have a question posed by him.
Maybe if we can linger for a moment, what do you think is special about Eric Weinstein for what you know of his work and his mind?
The way he sort of straddles so many different disciplines. It's like a Renaissance man. There are very few people like that at any given moment, let alone the 21st century, where information has become so, huge that it's almost physically impossible to be able to keep track of things. And yet he does, and he has his own unique vision and unique point of view, and he has integrity, which is like almost impossible. Like I can't think of so many people who possess those qualities. Almost no one.
And also the ability, in some sense, to embody the balance that you talked about of both the rigor of mathematics and the imagination.
Humanity also, I would say. Like we talk about imagination as a kind of a counterpoint to knowledge or logic. But just basic humanity, just basic, just compassion, just being able to, because every destructive society, like be it Germany, under Hitler, or Soviet Union under Stalin and so on, was based on some kind of what was considered unassailable truths. So it's kind of a conceptual system, if you think about it, right? There is a beautiful episode of this series by Jacob Bronowski, where he talks about, he filmed it in Auschwitz, talking about the certainty that what led the Nazis to killing people wholesale was it was almost a mathematical idea. And they just basically bought into this idea and checked out their humanity at the door. So I would say that antidote to this type of thing is not necessarily even imagination in a kind of elevated sense that we have been discussing today, that is exemplified by our greatest scientists and philosophers, but just basic humanity, basic common sense of just like knowing that that's just not right, and I don't care what my ideology tells me, but I'm just not going to do it. So that I think is kind of missing a little bit in today's society. People get a lot too caught up in the ideology, in certain conceptual frameworks.
So societies that lose that basic human compassion, that basic humanity, run into trouble.
Oh, very much so. But not only society, like a human being.
And Eric is one of the people, I agree with you, keeps that flame of humanity.
Like I trust that he will not do something that's not human, that's not right. I just feel that, like there's some people you just kind of feel that they won't cross that line.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing, today. Because I have to say, looking back, definitely, I have not hurt people personally, but like I could be mean, for instance. I could be harsh. And now I see it as a sign of weakness, as a sign of insecurity. I saw your interview with Ray Kurzweil the other day. Beautiful. I was really moved by it. But, that at some point I was like, I looked at him at this sort of like Dr. Evil. I'm kind of ashamed of it now, but like, I'm kind of coming clean. And I would, because, well, why? Because I needed an adversary in my mind, because I projected onto him kind of the fears that I had, that that AI will conquer us and so on. And this was rooted in my kind of awakening moment, in a sense, a kind of a moment where I suddenly started to see the other side. So, but I wasn't sure yet, you see.
You had to feel it.
So I had to have a fight about it.
Yeah, you had to actually have the projection.
I had to, so it was not in, I believe that it was not in me already. So I had to throw it onto somebody.
Yeah.
And that's not balance yet. So balance is when you recognize that it's you, actually. So, and I had this moment, actually. It was so amazing. Like, I would give this I would talk about AI and the dangers, and he would always be my, like, foil. Like, I would put like a sinister photograph of him on the slide. And it's like, look at this guy.
Yeah.
He wants to put nanobots into your brain. And he's also like high top executive at Google and so on. Like, so I would create this whole narrative. And then something happened where I was giving a lecture. This is 2015 in Aspen Ideas Festival, which is a wonderful festival. So keynote speech, actually. And I was doing my usual shtick. And then suddenly I said, I came up to that, and there was a big screen, and there was a picture of him there. And I came up to the screen and I kind of touched it with my hand. And I said, but I don't want to pick on Mr. Kurzweil because he's me. I had this revelation that I'm actually fighting with myself, with my own fears. And then I learned about his father, that his father died when he was young. And that he's very, to his credit, he's very sincere and upfront about it. Self-disclosure, I think, is very essential, by the way, in all this discussion. Like, what really motivates you? He said it publicly many times. Even as early as 2015, I could find this information, that he wanted to reunite with his father in the cloud. And suddenly I saw him not as a caricature that exemplified all my fears, but as a human being, a child longing for his father, grieving for his father. So suddenly it became a story, a love story. Mm-hmm. And, so in other words, I've seen it in myself, this capacity to project my own fears and then fight with other people over something that actually was my own. And as soon as I got to this point of seeing him, and then my next lecture, actually, I talked about him in this way. And I said, look, it's a love story. And he is actually, it's not how I would want to reunite with my father. But like you said, if I am consistent, I have to allow the possibility that different people perceive things differently. And so for him, that's his imagination. So, who is this? Voltaire, I think, is ascribed to Voltaire. So it's like, I disagree with you, but I will fight to death for you to have the right to say it. Yeah. So now that I feel like my position is more like, I disagree with him, that this is the way to approach death and to approach the death of our loved ones and how we miss them and how we, that sense of loneliness and inability to interact directly. That's not something that resonates with me, but I think it can also be called imagination from his perspective. And look, motivated by that, how much he has brought, how many interesting inventions, like his musical invention, for instance, naturally, because his father was a composer, a music composer and a conductor. So in other words, in the bigger scheme of things, even if I think he's misguided, still, I can't deny that it's a certain leap of faith from his perspective to try to say that this is the way we can all connect to our loved ones. And because it is sincere, And I see it now as sincere. And in fact, in your interview, you really teased it out of him. And I was really moved by it, I have to say. It's like, he has mellowed a little bit too, I said. It was really, really sweet when he talked about his father. And I can relate, my father died 4 years ago. And I can relate what a heartbreak. I was much older than Ray was when his father died. But I can relate to this longing and that grief, And when somebody is sincere and he puts opens his cards and, and says, that's what I want to do it, because I want to recreate my father and I want to be able to talk to him this way. Then we have then we understand, the opposite of it would be not disclosing and just pretending that this is how it's supposed to be in scientific terms. So it was replacing your real emotion, but come from the heart, by some kind of a theory which comes from the mind. And this is where we can go astray, because then we become captives of frameworks and conceptual systems which may not be beneficial to our society.
In tough times, we need the people that have not lost their way in the ideologies. We need the people who are still in touch with their heart. And you mentioned this with Eric. It's certainly true. I disagree with him on a lot of stuff, but I feel like when the world is burning down, Eric is one of the people you can still count on to have a heart. We've talked a lot over the past year about the war in Ukraine and the possibility of nuclear war. And it feels like he's one of the people I would call first. If God forbid something like a nuclear war began, because you look for people with a heart, no matter their ideas.
That's right. It takes courage and it takes a certain self-awareness, I would say. And which brings me, I think the crucial is that which was inscribed, on the temple of Apollo in Delphi. It was a statement, know thyself, know yourself, like who am I? Ultimately, it boils down to this. And all these debates. And the point is that I used to be, like I said, pessimistic at some point, and I was scared even of where development of AI was going. This is about 2014, 2015. And now I'm much more... So, for instance, after I saw Ray Kurzweil as a human being, after I could relate to him and sympathize with him, suddenly I stopped seeing him in the news. Like before that, I would always see him in the news saying, we're going to put nanobots in your brain by the year 2030, whatever, and then we upload you to by 21st. And I would be like, no, that's so terrible. Suddenly I didn't see him anymore. I had to,
Yeah.
So now it makes me question, who was creating the trouble?
What was all within
Was
you?
it him who was stirring the trouble, or was it my mind? You see? And so as I became self-aware, suddenly other possibilities opened. And suddenly that conflict, which, by the way, if I kept giving this nasty, talks about him, one day, I suppose we would have a debate. Yeah. And so you have this, one person says this, and then,
Yeah.
And what I learned is that it's a never-ending conflict. This conflict just does not end. But there is an alternative, there is a better way, which is to realize that it is you arguing with yourself. Now, if you want to continue arguing with yourself, continue as long as you need. Just be careful not to destroy too many things, in the process. But there is an option of actually dropping it. I was so surprised by this.
Yeah, it's discovering in yourself the human capacity for compassion. And you understand that he has a perspective. He is operating in the space of imagination, a human being like you. And we're all in this kind of together trying to figure this out.
Both, ultimately. And also, it's like, with realizing how much I have screwed up, comes this humility also. Yeah. So, I find it extremely hard now to, really lash out at somebody and to say, you're horrible, whatever. Because immediately the question is, who am I to criticize, So, is there another way to have a dialogue? Is there a way to, speaking, since we talked about the innocence of a child and how much it drives a discovery in science and so on. I remember, I think I heard of Adya Shanti who gave this nice example. He's like, when you're a kid, you go and you play with your friends and then you fight with another kid. And he was like, I hate you. I don't want to see you again. And you just go home like after half an hour. Okay, what are you going to do? You want to play. So you come out, it's like, hey, you want to play? You don't talk about what happened. You don't rehash this, just keep going.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we are on the verge, maybe, of learning that. Because I think that if we continue to push each of us, our set of ideas and like ideologies and like, what matters to us and so on. Like, yeah, but no, what matters to you, but like, there are other ways to approach other people. There are other ways you can find point of contact. Speaking of which, mathematical formulas are universal, represent universal knowledge. 2 + 2 is 4, whether you vote for this guy or that guy in the election. How about that as a point of contact, of commonality, And nobody can patent those formulas. Did you know that? There is a Supreme Court decision that mathematical formulas cannot be patented. Like Einstein could not patent E = mc squared. It doesn't belong to him because if the formula is correct, then it belongs to everyone.
So what do you think of that all too tricky question? And if you want, I can deeply bias your answer by giving the list of 4 that Eric provided.
Oh, no, let me give mine. I cannot see, by the way, what you have.
Yes.
But I can guess some of them. So I'm going to try to do something different from him. So I already mentioned one, which is that you have one-dimensional numerical system, which is real numbers. You have two-dimensional, which is complex numbers. You have four-dimensional, and it's probably connected to what he wrote because it has to do with some homotopy groups of spheres and stuff like that. Then, of course, one I love. Okay, 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 + 5 + 6 and so on. Does it make any sense? The sum. I mean, you probably heard about this one. It became very popular at some point. 1 + 2 + 3. I did a video for Numberphile, the YouTube channel, about it maybe 10 years ago. So 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 + 5 ostensibly diverges, goes to infinity, because you get a bigger and bigger number. And yet there is a way to make sense of it, in which it comes up to -1/12. How fascinating. First of all, the answer is not even a positive number, and it's not an integer. It's not a whole number. It's -1/12. So sometimes people ask me, what is your favorite number? And it's a kind of a joke. I say -1/12. It's actually 42.
So your favorite number is not an ordered set.
Right.
So what else?
What else?
So
Langland's program, of course. I have to mention that.
And we'll explore that in depth. Do you want to know what Eric said?
Sure.
Sphere aversion, Boy's surface, Hopf vibration.
Hopf vibration, okay.
And pi1 of SO3.
Okay. Oh yes. So that's the famous cup trick, Okay, look. So this is how it works.
No tricks.
No tricks.
No magic.
All honest. It is magical, okay? But not because I'm tricking you. So you start with a bottle like this or a cup, and you start twisting it. And at the same time, you twist your arm. Then you come. So this is actually going to rotate at 360 degrees, full turn. Then you say, okay, I won't be able to do another turn because then my arm would really get twisted. I'll have to go see a doctor.
Yes.
Yet, if I do it second time, it untwists. This is the pi1 of SO3 Eric is talking about.
Yes.
So there is something where the first motion is not trivial, but if you double down on it, you come back to the initial position. It's very closely connected to the fact that we have elementary particles of two types, bosons and fermions. So bosons are, for example, photons or carriers of other forces, or the Higgs boson. It is called a boson for a reason, because it is a boson. In honor of Indian mathematician Bose, B-O-S-E, and Einstein. So these particles obey what's called Bose-Einstein statistics. But then there are other particles called fermions, in honor of Enrico Fermi, Italian-born mathematician who worked in the US. And they follow what's called Dirac-Fermi statistics. And those are electrons and constituents of matter, electrons, protons, neutrons, and so on. And they have a certain duplicity, if you will. And that duplicity is rooted mathematically in this experiment, this little experiment that I have just done. So I imagine, speaking of imagination, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of riffing on this. Imagine a world in which this will not be shocking, or like, in this case, it's not even shocking because I haven't really explained the details, because I can't do it in 2 minutes. I indicated what this is all about and so on. But imagine a world in which this is not foreign to most people, that most people have seen it before, or they're not afraid to approach this type of questions. Because, we talked a little bit about math education, but I really believe that a lot of people in our society, and it is not only in the United States, but throughout the world, a lot of people have been traumatized. It's really PTSD. That's why people, when they see mathematical formula, or like even like they need to calculate tip on a bill, they're terrified, because it brings up those memories when they were kids and being called to blackboard and solve a problem. You can't solve a problem, and an unscrupulous teacher says, "You're an idiot. Sit down," and you feel ashamed and lowly, and that stays with you. And so I think that unfortunately that's where we are. But one can dream, and so my dream is that one day we'll be able to overcome this, and actually all of these treasures of mathematics will become widely available, or at least people will know where to find them, and they will not be afraid of going there and looking. And I think this will help, because like I said, for one thing, it gives you a sense of belonging. It kind of is an antidote to the kind of alienation and separation that we feel today, oftentimes because of ideological divide, sectarian strife, and all kinds of things like that. Because then you will, once you see there's like a critical mass of this beauty that kind of like dawns on you, is like, my God, this is what we all have in common.